Welcome to my first video in 2023 where I want to talk about 7 costly Google Ads mistakes in Q1 23. Now, why Q1? Because these are some of the mistakes that I see at the moment, so they're quite up to date, right? I want to collect them and every now and then post a video with some mistakes and issues that I see that are very common, but not necessarily very well known. So people might not really be aware that it is an issue. So it's not like you bid too much or you bid too little or something, right? So these are mistakes that I see all the time when new clients come to me, and yet many people are not aware that are making these mistakes. So without any further ado, let's start with the first mistake. And the first mistake, it's especially of course up to date because of PMAX, is over optimizing PMAX. So what does that mean? Well, I see a lot of people that come in and they try to micromanage PMAX campaigns. You see here one of my bigger PMAX campaigns. We spent 200,000 euros over the course of a few months, and we're pretty profitable with it because with Triple Whale and our third-party tracking, we're roughly at a ROAS of like 3.5, 3.6, and we're doing very, very fine with that. But the point is, initially I was also when this campaign started, right, this was at the very beginning of PMAX because the campaign is older than what you can see right here. In the beginning, I always thought okay, I need to optimize and change PMAX all the time, right? And don't get me wrong, you have to make adjustments, you have to plan PMAX properly, you have to structure it right, you have to make sure that you put the right products in, the right assets, and then of course manage all the other campaigns. But if the PMAX campaign is running well, your job is not to change audiences all the time and play with the assets all the time and artificially create new asset groups, etc. Because I see people that treat PMAX as a very basic thing, like a search campaign where you can just replace a few keywords very easily. A PMAX campaign is a huge thing with many placements and assets and things in there, and it takes very long to optimize. It doesn't mean that when you change something, it will all break apart. But if you do that all the time, which again, many people that I know do, the PMAX campaign will never unleash its full potential. So what is the right thing here to do? Well, of course, the right thing to do isn't to just sit back and do nothing, but it's also not to make adjustments all the time like crazy. Definitely even more so than with other campaigns like shopping and search. I recommend to build a PMAX optimization routine. I talk about that in my training, but also on this channel every now and then I talked about PMAX campaigns, like a routine where you, for example, on a regular basis, try some new assets. Unfortunately, we cannot really assess the asset performance anymore at this point. But you can try new assets when you made new photos, or maybe if one asset group is highly underperforming, of course you can pause it, try something new, try new products, etc., but not do this tiny micromanagement. The next issue is not using enhanced conversions, and that's a very quick one. So that's something that you can implement immediately, right? If you go to your conversions tab where you can see the different conversions that you're using, go to your purchase conversion, and in there you see at the top, as you can see here, the different sort of properties of the conversion, and then here at the bottom you see turn on enhanced conversions. This is something that, depending on the case, may give you another 5 to 10% in conversions. Now, of course, they're not made from thin air, right? These are conversions that are happening already, but Google is not tracking them. So the point is, if you turn that on, enhanced conversion, it's very straightforward. If you click it, there will be a dialog, super easy. If you turn that on, you will see 5 to 10% more conversions on average that are attributed to your Google Ads. And that's the important point. The conversions happen anyway. But by attributing them, you make sure that you fuel Google with more data, you accumulate more conversions, better reporting, more accurate reporting, better optimization. So that's an absolute no-brainer. Takes a few minutes and you're done, right? And I would say 80% of the accounts that come to me for help, for management, for consulting, whatever, they don't have that in place. There's almost no case where you shouldn't use it, in my opinion. So go ahead, try it out, and you should see a few percent more conversions, depending on your niche. Might be a bit more or a bit less. So next point is highly similar RSAs, responsive search ads, and no testing. That's also something that I see all the time. People use the responsive search ads format in kind of the worst way possible. The worst things you can do is either to just have an RSA with like 3 random headlines, right? Like very, very basic. The other one is if you have a lot of headlines, but they're all super similar. So I made a little example here: the best sneakers, hot sneakers, buy now, discover our sneaker selection, buy cool sneakers, get your next pair of sneakers, heavily discounted sneakers, free shipping. The list goes on. You could sprinkle some other things in, like 10% discount and this and that. It doesn't have to be like it's not all about sneakers necessarily, but if you have headlines that are super similar, right, like no additional information, no additional benefits, no features about the product, but just like this typical marketing blah blah, as I call it: buy cool sneakers, get your next pair of sneakers, discover sneakers. It's fine if you have them like 1 or 2 times in the ad, but if literally all your headlines are like that and super similar, there is no point really in testing them, because get your next pair of sneakers and discover our sneaker selection. I can already predict those will probably perform very, very similarly, right? Both of them do not really give much context. They just say that you have sneakers to offer. That's it. And I cannot imagine that one of them will get a 10% click rate, the other one will get a 1, or one will get a 4% conversion rate, the other one will get a 0.5. But that's exactly what you're looking for, right? With RSA testing, you are testing as many headlines as possible, and they should be as different as possible and as distinct as possible in order to find those that are performing best. And ideally, they are super different so that you can say, okay, this one is heavily overperforming, that's why the RSA now gets better results, etc. Then you can even test multiple RSAs, what I will talk about in a second too. But this is really what you need to do. Else, stick with fewer headlines. If I see something like that, I would reduce it down to like 4, but make them a lot more unique. It's better to have less headlines, but more unique, more creative, than have a ton of them very similar, because it just creates a very long testing period that is not really useful in the first place, right? Then we have not testing broad match with target ROAS for search. Most people I know still run exact match keywords for the most part, maybe some phrase and very little broad. Of course, not all of them. Many businesses have now actually shifted towards broad match. But very, very regularly when I do audits or onboard new accounts or work for new businesses, I see a lot of exact match still. Oftentimes with manual CPC or with target ROAS, but it's exact match. The problem here is that, and I mentioned this one several times on the channel already, the problem is that broad match has gotten a lot better. And I'm going to look across all my hundreds and thousands of search campaigns across all the accounts that I work with. I can definitely tell you that broad match works the best. Like broad match across the board works the best. It has the most volume. In many cases, it even has higher ROAS than like exact match counterparts. Of course, there are still cases where phrase and exact work better, but I would say like 70% of the time, broad match is outperforming. And I would say broad match is probably responsible for like 80% of all the search ads revenue, all the volume, right? So if you're still running exact match with target ROAS or broad match with manual CPC, you should try this particular combination, broad match, target ROAS, because now you have all the options, or Google has all the options to give you all the traffic. And it is mixed with target ROAS, so there are so many signals that Google can look at, especially if you have high spend, you should do it. If you're a brand new account, very few conversions, very little spend, then that's not the right strategy for you. But as soon as the account is mature and you have some decent budget, spending $100, $200 a day anyway on the search campaign, then this can definitely work. And I highly recommend trying it out. Then launching PMAX campaigns too early. That's a very common one I see here as well, because you're not really to blame for that if you do it, right? Because Google pushes it so heavily. But if you run a PMAX campaign, make sure that either you have a very, very high budget, or that you tried everything else and it didn't work. Sometimes you're lucky and then PMAX randomly works, or you just want more volume. Here's another example of a client that came to me, right? And you see already 10,000 at a very low ROAS of 1.1 in that time frame here, in that month and a half roughly. At this point, they barely had any conversions and stuff going on in other campaigns, right? They spent a couple hundred, 1,000 or 2,000 on other campaigns, and they just immediately went to PMAX. And you see they made sales with that, but very, very unprofitably and without the insights that you get from like shopping and search. So I highly recommend to start with standard shopping and search. get all the data, optimize a bit manually, you know, with negative keywords, and in case of search, optimization of the search ads through ad testing, keywords, negative keywords, etc. In case of shopping, negative keywords testing, eliminating products, and so on and so forth. PMAX, as I said, should be for scaling. It should be to bring in more volume. It should be to really grow the account. It shouldn't be what you start with, because you're skipping all the testing, all the learning, etc. You're just throwing your money at Google hoping that something sticks, and if it doesn't, well, then you don't know what went wrong, because PMAX offers so little insights and it's a black box, just like smart shopping has been. So don't do it too early. Test the other ones first, spend some money, make some sales ideally, and then eventually go to PMAX for scaling. Number 6 is the wrong attribution model. Very simple. That is probably way more common, but also many people are aware of that, I think. Don't use last click and first click. That's essentially the only thing you need to know about attribution models. If you go to conversions, click into them just as with the previous one with enhanced tracking. You have to make sure that you don't use last or first click. I recommend linear or linear or position-based typically, or data-driven. As soon as you have some regular conversions and spend, you can almost always switch to data-driven without a problem. Last click and first click are just not calculating conversion attribution correctly. This is not a massive problem that will destroy your account. But if you are not sort of crediting each ad with the right piece or with the right share of a conversion, it means that your account will never be perfectly optimized, right? If Google doesn't know, or if Google cannot represent the value and importance of a click of an ad accordingly, and they just give it to the last interaction, it will always be only half the truth at best. So you need to switch it. Very simple, very easy. You can do this immediately after watching the video if you like, because I can tell you 95% of the time you shouldn't use last click, which is the default, unfortunately. And then, whoops, I have a little typo there. It should be number 7, but I'm sure you get what I mean. It's too many similar ads, right? I made this little example here where I created 4 different responsive search ads saying the best sneakers, buy them here, etc. Buy sneakers online, similar to what we had before, but multiple ads. And this is, I would say, probably even worse than this one large RSA with all the very similar headlines. I saw that in many accounts as well. I did my initial audit before working together, and I looked in a search campaign seeing like 8 different responsive search ads. That number is already way too high when you go with expanded text ads, or when you used to go with them a couple of months ago before they were turned off, right? With RSA, it's even worse, because if I see people having like 7 RSAs, each with 15 headlines, you can imagine it takes like literally forever to see any sort of results coming in. And especially if you have a low budget. I very often see people $30 per day budget on a campaign, and they have like 4 ad groups with 5 responsive search ads per ad group. This is definitely not going to work. I usually just keep my responsive search ads at 1, but optimize them very well with very different headlines, very unique, etc. Sometimes I use 2 when it makes sense, and that's it. Like more than 2 RSAs, in my opinion, are almost never worth it, except for unique cases where you just go with a few headlines per RSA because you want to test a different ad angle. Again, something I talk about in my training, but I want to keep it very short here. Basically, you can go with different ad angles, right? One being more feature driven, the other one being like more benefit driven, or you want to test a specific approach versus another one. And then it can be useful to just have a few RSAs with less headlines, because now you can actually tell which approach works better. If it's all in the same, you can see how often they're showing, and you get a performance grading from Google as well, but it's not as straightforward and accurate as if you have like multiple ads going on, and then you can test them and you can see, okay, ad number 3 with the approach XYZ works best, I want to keep it. And that's how you can actually breed the best ads, so to speak. But that's really something you should do. There should be a reason for multiple RSAs, and if you have them, make sure that they're distinct. But especially if you run on a low budget, don't bother having 2 RSAs, and certainly not 3, 4, 5 and beyond. That is very important if you want to save a lot of money, because that way you get faster testing, right? So those were my 7 mistakes that I see people make all the time. As I said, I'm collecting them and every now and then give you an update when I think it's worthwhile. I don't want to just come up with the, same common things, like, as I said in the beginning, some very basic things everyone knows, like, hey, you should optimize your product feed or things like that. I hope these issues were a bit less common, or maybe there are 2 or 3 that you're making that you can now stop. Let me know in the comments if there was a mistake that you currently make that I now helped you with. And yeah, if you want to learn more, of course, subscribe to this channel and check out the 2 links in my description. One takes you to my training, the eCom PPC Academy, where I go through anything Google Ads related for e-commerce, and the other one goes to my site if you want me to help you with your ads personally to grow your account, scale, optimize, hit more ROAS, hit more revenue. We might be speaking on the phone soon if you do that, but it's not mandatory to jump on a phone call in the first place. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. I look forward to see you in the next one, and now I wish you a great year 2023 and look forward to see you soon. Bye-bye.